within Big Pharma. But today, of course, we're talking about a school shooting that took place in Uvalde, Texas. And this school shooting is worse than any other that we've ever seen. And it's worse in a particular way that is unimaginable, that is unconscionable, and that brings to the fore all kinds of issues in our country. And the reason that this school shooting that took place in Uvalde, Texas is so much worse than any other that we've seen in recent years is because in this case the school shooter received the assistance of law enforcement. By all accounts, and given that we're still early into this story, but based on videos that we have seen, based on reports that we have from on the ground, today the DOJ launching an investigation into the conduct of law enforcement, but by all appearances, it seems that what happened was that law enforcement refused to go into the school. Remember, this is what we saw in Columbine. In the Columbine school shooting, the police refused to go in. They waited for the SWAT team to arrive. And as a result of that, many people were unnecessarily killed by the school shooters who could have been stopped. And the entire country said, well, you can have a mulligan, you can have one, but from now on what we know is that what law enforcement are to do is that they are to storm into the school. They are called first responders for a reason, and they are to respond. And what we know from mass shootings is that the psychology of the mass shooter is a very warped one, and it is one in which these mass shooters will often eliminate themselves. They will often commit suicide on the spot at the sign of resistance, the first sign of resistance. Whether that is a concealed carry holder that presents himself or a law enforcement officer, these shooters will almost never get into actual shootouts with people who can engage them. Instead, they quickly blow off their own heads, typically. And in this case, what we saw is that law enforcement refused to respond. They refused to enter the school. And instead, what the police officers did is that they cordoned off the school as the shooter is executing second graders inside the school. And law enforcement stopped parents from going in. Presumably, this is Texas, some of them carrying firearms themselves, who could have stopped this. And the law enforcement officers who are standing around armed with AR-15s tackle the parents to the ground. They stomp them to the ground. They handcuff them. In one case, at least one case, they tase a woman who's trying to go in and save her child. This is pure evil at the hands of these police officers. And this is a small town, I think of 16,000. They are a town that has its own SWAT team, though. They have quite a competent police department. They receive really a tremendous amount of money every year in federal grants to support their acquisition of equipment and training for their SWAT team. And this SWAT team, which includes a female member, well, they were nowhere to be found. And the rank and file officers, some of whom were actually on that SWAT team, but acting in a patrol capacity in this case, only served to swat parents to the ground who were attempting to save their children from a vicious school shooter. That is what played out in Texas this week. It's on video for everyone to see. Not video from the media, but video from fellow parents or bystanders who were on the scene. Now, you'll have the normal talking points. They aren't even worth going over at this point, that come out from the left and from the right in the wake of school shootings. The right will not ever point out that the vast majority of school shootings and the vast majority of mass shootings, period, are carried out by the most crime-ridden demographic in this country, that is black Americans. The right won't point that out. They won't point out that the majority of mass shootings, which are defined as shootings of more than 4 or more victims, they won't point out that these shootings are carried out in a gang fashion by blacks and Hispanics, that normally there are very few white people that ever carry out mass shootings of any kind. They're remarkably rare. They won't talk about that on the right. They won't talk about how this is really a black American problem. It's a problem of gangs. It's a problem of the ghetto. They won't discuss that. They get back to very sort of robotic talking points about how a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with